whether it's Medicare. The issue on this is again, telling this word salad of things that I've never said that. I certainly have lived my life in a responsible manner. I've certainly given back to try and make sure things work. And I have to tell you, I'm one of 6 members of Congress. I froze my salary in 2006. I wrote a check every month for $720 after taxes to go back to pay down the deficit. And that's the types of things. I've lived my life that way. I'm disciplined once I voted for these cuts. I'm making sure that we can get there in a balanced approach.
Thank you. Next question from Julie.
We have a question from the audience. Will the Affordable Care Act have a positive or negative impact on the Mayo Clinic?
Okay, Alan, 1 minute response. Did you hear the question?
I have
Julie, would you like to read the question?
Again, this is a question from the audience. Will the Affordable Care Act have a positive or negative impact on the Mayo Clinic?
The Affordable Care Act will have a negative impact on the Mayo Clinic. And I want to mention just one of the ways it'll have a negative impact, and that is the huge marriage penalty that is in the Affordable Care Act. The marriage penalty is so extreme, a couple making $60,000 evenly divided between 2 people under private insurance, which we're going to have more and more of under the Affordable Care Act, will pay $10,425 more for their health insurance if they're married. The way the Affordable Care Act is structured, you pay exorbitant premium costs and you get tax credits back. 86% of the tax credits go to people not married. 14% go to people who are married. And I assure you, everything I say is verified to the max. So married, middle-class people who are going to pay most of the bills under the Affordable Care Act have 3 choices. Pay the discriminatory tax, and this is discrimination, divorce and live together, or drop their health insurance. That means many will drop their health insurance. Mayo is not going to get the money it has been promised. It isn't going to be there, folks.
Okay, Mr. Walz.
Well, the problem in Congress is if the assumption is the people you're working with, that you see that this is somehow some type of an assault on marriage, to be very clear, what Alan's talking about here is, it's the way we figure everything, that a couple living together has less expenses. There's 6% of the public will receive affordability credits. Alan's the equivalent of this, complaining if you go to a restaurant, you got a coupon that says 1 per table, that they're discriminating against you and your wife because you got 1 free. He's asking for more government subsidies to offset that difference. With that being said, the Mayo Clinic will certainly benefit from this. What the Affordable Care Act does is it forces the rest of the country to start acting like Mayo, to start delivering on accountable care organizations that come together, to making sure that you don't buy a machine just so you can use it and charge Medicare and overcharge them. It's making sure that you deliver on exactly what you're going to do and your outcomes are measured. And that's why the Mayo Clinic made the case during this debate is that the status quo is absolutely unsustainable and we need to move forward. That's why I spent countless hours with them of trying to figure out what we can put in sections 1157 through 1161, change that ratio, that Mayo stands to benefit on this in the terms of delivery of care as much as anybody out there.
Mr. Quist, 30 seconds.
Okay, let's cut to the quick here. We are, in the Affordable Care Act, you have extraordinary discrimination against married people. That is a fact. And I think Mr. Walz has to explain why he thinks discrimination against married people is okay. It's not a question of one person living in California and another person living in New York. It's a question of people living together unmarried. Okay? Their costs are no higher than married people. Why discriminate against the married people? Why force middle-class married people to drop their insurance? I mean, this is nuts.
Right, Mr. Quist,
what happened to equity?
Our next question is from Eric.
Returning to foreign policy, now that the surge of U.S. troops in Afghanistan has officially ended, what's our end game there? Is it possible to envision a future in which the United States will have no troops on the ground in Afghanistan, or at least a future in which international forces will outnumber our own?
Congressman.
Yes, there is a future that can go that direction. The situation in Afghanistan was poorly executed. The folks who carried out the attack on the United States and who threatened the true freedoms, real terrorists, that try and bring this is a definite threat to us. This is a huge issue that we need to deal internationally. It's a huge issue to other established democracies. These folks are anarchists who disagree with any type of modernization. For us in Afghanistan, the boots on the ground situation is not going to be there. I have not believed and have spoken public about this for a long time that we have the ability to train that force. What we need to be able to do is containment on the radical elements, the Al-Qaeda elements, the Haqqani elements. That's going to mean partnering and making sure that and I've said this for many years too, making sure our allies are true allies. With allies like Pakistan, who needs enemies? We need to make sure that with the civilized nations of the world start to make an approach on that, of making sure we're sharing information, making sure we're containing that. And I think for all of us, yes, there's a long run, because what I believe at heart is the vast majority of people, whether they be in Afghanistan, Iraq, Egypt, Pakistan, or the United States, they want a better life for their children. We need to make sure that the situation is being set up that they can do that.
You know, I'm not sure what that meant, but we have to face the facts here. I mean, in Afghanistan, we don't know what the future is going to be. We can hope for the best, but we really don't know. But I think we have to talk about principles when it comes to foreign engagement. And I said I'm a stickler in the Constitution, and let me say just a little bit about principles. The federal government and the Constitution were formed primarily for the purpose of national defense. Okay, that's why we formed the federal government. That's why we went to the U.S. Constitution instead of the Articles of Confederation. National defense is priority one, and I am committed to having the strongest possible national defense that we can possibly have. But we also have to keep in mind the Constitution in the preamble says that the Constitution was formed for national defense. Nation building and national defense are not necessarily the same. And there are going to be a wealth of judgment calls here that need to be made, but at least we need to know the principles upon which we're going to base our discussion.
Thank you. 30 seconds.
Well, first, let's be very clear. This is a big difference between Alan and I. I don't believe anyone's run for this office with less experience on national defense and how we use the military. I want to be very clear. There's a reason that every major military organization, from the Veterans of Foreign War to the Disabled American Veterans of the American Legion, has singled me out as a leader, not just on veterans issues, but on foreign policy and how we deal with this. I think that the American people, the goodness of where they're at, is certainly there to extend freedoms as much as we can. We can do that in a powerful manner, but we can do it on the strength of what's good in this country, and that's a difference.
Tim, thank you. Alan, you will respond to our next question from Mark.
Back on jobs here, and if we can get some specific answers here to this question, it would be great. One of the bright spots in the economy right now appears to be manufacturing. What would you do to help ensure U.S. manufacturers are globally competitive?
Excellent question. The first is we have to roll back a lot of the counterproductive regulations, and these are EPA, some of them OSHA and the like. I mean, the regulatory agencies have added $43 billion a year just during the last 4 years of extra cost on businesses. This makes us less competitive. The so-called Unaffordable Care Act, according to what businesses tell us, are making us less competitive. High energy costs are making us less competitive. You know why the Big Stone power plant wasn't built in South Dakota? It's because the EPA said you're not going to meet the carbon dioxide requirements down the road. There are other things we have to do. We have to bargain for genuine, fair trade and free trade. Right now, for example, the Chinese tax their companies with a value-added tax of about 20%. If they ship to the United States, that tax is never collected. That gives them about a 20% advantage just by that in competing with our goods. Then they jimmy the currency around for about another 17%. Why don't we bargain for fair trade? We need to do it.
Well, I agree with Alan on that the trade deals we've cut in the past have certainly been at a disadvantage. I think manufacturing is something we innately feel is absolutely essential to the growth of this nation. Our workers in this country are 6 times more productive than the workers in China. What we need to do in this nation is start acting more like Americans and less like Chinese. This isn't about driving down wages. And you go into any business, I've been in 77 manufacturers in the last 90 days, and none of them complain about their OSHA requirements. What they talk about is we need a skilled workforce that has the ability to deliver these products. We need an infrastructure that allows us to compete by moving our products to market in a cheaper, faster manner. And what we need is a strategy that makes sure that the investments that are being done at the land-grant universities are being able to transfer in. We're seeing today in Maplewood, 3M's announcing a new plant. We know where 3M got started. We know that investment, that the partnership was there, and we know the job growth that they're going to create gets them there. So manufacturing, I'm of the belief, is absolutely critical. When Alexander Hamilton said in 1791 that we need a national strategy and a partnership between the government, the private sector, and manufacturing, it's still true today.
Tim, thank you. 30 seconds, Alan.
Well, I would just say that, I mean, if you believe that manufacturers aren't complaining about the requirements of the EPA and OSHA and so on, go to the U.S. Chamber website, because that records the poll results of small businesses. Why aren't you creating jobs? And one of the factors that small businesses cite is unrealistic regulations, and that includes OSHA, EPA, and others. So don't believe me. just go to the chamber website. And I'll tell you, I'm talking to different people than Mr. Walz, because they tell me the same thing.
Thank you, Alan. Tim, you will respond to our next question from Julie.
I am going to ask one on jobs. Keeping and growing jobs in the U.S. is important for the United States to have a healthy economy. Free trade agreements have been touted as bringing economic growth to the U.S. How do we grow exports from U.S. companies, but very importantly, also not export U.S. jobs?
Excellent. Well, it can be done, and I supported and worked on for many years the Korea Free Trade Agreement that gave an incredible outlook for our agricultural products and value added that came out of this country. The way we do this is we first and foremost start negotiating from a position of our principles. That if you're going to export to this country, you're going to deal with things, then you should treat your workers with the human dignity they deserve. You should make sure you're playing by the rules and you're not subsidizing them to the point, and Alan's right, Chinese currency manipulation has been a huge problem. But the government, in many cases, through the Bush administration and through the Obama administration, has been unable or unwilling to deal with it. What we understand is we are about 3% of the world's population. That means 97% of potential customers lie outside the United States. We need to foster those trade agreements, making sure that they're fair, making sure we manufacture. You're seeing them come back home because guess what? We can do it better, we can do it more efficiently, and we can do it faster. The day that we're going to export jobs just because we can drive down labor costs is ending. And so I think we negotiate these things from a position of fairness, a position of strength, create the economic engine that lets me grow.
1 minute.
I'm delighted we finally agree on something. It took us a while to get there. The problem is, you know, what Mr. Walz says and what he does are very, very different things. Again, what are the barriers for free enterprise? It's the Affordable Jobs Act, it's all these regulations, it's the debt. They think the debt is very significant because they don't want to put themselves out on the limb. The thing with free trade, and I'm a total free trader, I'm an Adam Smith free enterprise guy, I'm a free trader, but it has to be genuine free trade. Calling it free trade and it being free trade are two very, very, very different things. And we do have fault on both parties here because the Chinese do discriminate against our products. Now, keep in mind, however, that our best export in the United States is agricultural commodities, okay? I mean, I personally am part of the engine that drives the economy of the United States of America, and I'm delighted to be there. We need to use those exports for bargaining power to get fair trade with China and the other countries of the world.
Mr. Quist, thank you. Mr. Walz.
And keep in mind, and I am glad Alan is part of that, I am glad our agriculture economy is there, but keep in mind, Alan, you were also supported with $600,000 in assistance. Now, all of us benefit from that in a stable part of the economy. The issue is, you come and tell people that it's this, the government shouldn't be involved in everything, with this hand saying it needs to be there. I'm not faulting the policy because I think it works, but you can't say it on one hand and then not deliver it on the other. The issue on this is for trade to be truly free, it's got to be fair. And that's where we can negotiate better, cut better deals, export our products.
We have 10 more minutes in this debate before our 2-minute closing statements.